Okay, dispelling myths. A lot of myths for Christians and uh, need to be dispelled. Like, for example, about why Job, what happened to Job, which is in black and white in that book, that he was not being judged at all. There's a lot of myths that need to be dispelled, and I wanted to dispel some myths about the devil. And first of all, looking at Isaiah 14, what it says there, it says, "How you were fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning." It's like, why would you call him son of the morning? Since he's about darkness, but maybe it's because of the angel of light thing. I don't know. "How we were cut down to the ground, you who weakened the nations. For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation on the farthest sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, I will be like the Most High. Yet you shall be brought down to Sheol, to the lowest depths of the pit. Those who see you will gaze at you and consider you, saying, Is this the man who made the earth tremble, who shook kingdoms, who made the world as a wilderness and destroyed its cities, who did not open the house of his prisoners?" Yeah. It's interesting how it goes from talking about Lucifer and then talking about a man, and we know about the man of sin. Um, I believe Muhammad was the man of sin, and then the Bible says there's many antichrists, and Paul thought the man of sin was the leader at that time, which is what, Nero or Caligula. But so the myth I wanted to dispel, like, because I heard somebody talking about, they believed he was, he was a musician, and he was all these great things, um, and then I found this passage that he was talking about, where it talks about the devil, and I have to find that passage, and then I'll come back and read that. But the passage talks about, how he was perfect. He was perfect in all these ways, and then it makes mention of timbrel and harp or something. But somebody, I was reading online, someone talking about that, saying they're not sure that that's even clear that he ever was a musician, that he ever had any talent at all. And the interesting thing about the devil in the account of the Garden of Eden, the devil encountering man for the first time. Now he's been cast to the earth. He's wandering to and fro upon the earth, like it says in Job. And then he encounters us, humankind, for the first time. And he deceives them on the basis of telling first Eve, who then convinces Adam to go her way. He first convinces her that he says, I will make you like God, knowing good and evil. And the crazy thing about that, and the way that he deceives everybody, is through things that are totally not even rational. And when you think about it, it's not logical, because we were already more like God than the devil. And he's saying, I will make you like God, knowing good and evil. And what he really meant was, he thought he was God. And like it says there, I will ascend, I will sit on the throne of God. He thought he was God, and he was telling them he'd make them more like God. He meant he'd make them more like him. And that is exactly what happened. In the garden, giving into his deception, then humankind became more like Satan, knowing evil and good. And so that's the thing is, and then becoming more like him in terms of being antagonistic towards God, and wanting to oppose God as he did. So that was the beginning of becoming more like the devil. And then today, a lot of people have become, through the generations, through sin that's compounded, become so much like the devil that they become the perfect companions for the devil. But the thing is, we were made in the image of God. We're already like God more than he was, and that's why he hated us and why he wanted to deceive us. And so that's a really important thing to know, that starting out, we were more like God, and then through the new Adam and his cancellation for anyone who puts faith in him of that of that sin, um, we are promised to then become conformed to the image of Christ, and then become even more like God than we were in the garden. But I mean, it's just important to know this about the devil, though, I think. And then I'm just gonna stop here, and I'm gonna come back, and I'm gonna find that passage where it talks about him, and where it includes talking about him having any talent, which I don't really know that he ever did. I also know that he doesn't really know what God is like. He says, I'll make you like God, and he doesn't really know what God is like. He just doesn't really seem to ever have had any kind of heart love relationship with God where he even understood God in the first place, because he just doesn't understand God's character and nature. He doesn't understand why someone who has as much power as God doesn't just come in and just, trample you and just control you. He doesn't understand, why does God allow you freedom? Why does he allow you freedom of choice? Because he wouldn't do that if he was God. He's thinking that he's God, and he's always trying to come in and take over. So I found this other passage, and it says, Lamentation for the King of Tyre. Let's see, it is in Ezekiel 28. Proclamation against the King of Tyre. So again, it's talking about someone who's human, but yet it's talking about the devil. And this is where they get this. Son of man, say to the prince of Tyre, because your heart is lifted up, and you say, I am a god, I sit in the seat of gods in the midst of the seas. Yet you are a man and not a god, though you set your heart as the heart of a god. So there's probably a lot of correlation here between the devil and these men of sin that we have had. Behold, your wives in a den, and there's no secret that can be hidden. With your wisdom and your understanding, you have gained riches for yourself, gathered gold and silver into your treasures. By your great wisdom in trade, you have increased your riches. Your heart is lifted up because your riches. Because you have set your heart as the heart of a god, therefore I will bring strangers against you, the most terrible of the nations. They shall draw their swords against the beauty of your wisdom and defile your splendor. This is where, this is the only place where they get the stuff about being the devil, being, here it is again, being a musician and all this stuff. Word of the Lord, obviously it's very cryptic. You're talking about the King of Tyre, and if you don't have the Holy Spirit for starters, there's no way you're going to understand this stuff. It's very cryptic, and Jewish people who study it in Hebrew, they probably understand it a lot better. It says, you were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering. The sardius, topaz, and diamond, beryl, onyx, jasper, sapphire, turquoise, and emerald with gold. The workmanship of your timbrels and pipes, this is the only place where they get this, was prepared for you on the day you were created. You were the anointed cherub who covers. I established you. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked back and forth in the midst of fiery stones. You were perfect in your ways from the day you were created, till iniquity was found in you. By the abundance of your trading, you became filled with violence within, and you sinned. Therefore I cast you as a profane thing out of the mountain of God, and I destroyed you, O covering cherub, from the midst of the fiery stones. There's talking about casting him out of heaven. Your heart was lifted up because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor. I cast you to the ground. I laid you before kings that they might gaze at you. You defiled your sanctuaries by the multitude of your iniquities. A lot of parallels between the devil and people who have sort of behaved in the way that the devil behaved here. It's not exactly clear. It's not exactly clear. So anyway, what my understanding was that the Lord showed me when I read this was, he's saying to the devil, and it's the King of Tyre, but he's saying it to the devil because this is where they get the stuff about the devil, right? So they're understanding this is also to the devil. You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. And then it's saying this, you were the anointed cherub. I established you. You were on the holy mountain. You walked back and forth. You were perfect in your ways, and from the day you were created till iniquity is found in you. We know that God created the devil, not people, but we know he created the devil to be evil. And he didn't predestine people to be evil, but I do believe, and I think we believe, that he predestined the devil to be evil. So when he's talking this way to him, he's talking about his perfection, and I think that it's all meant to draw from him his pride. It's God's way of drawing out his pride, talking about him as perfect, saying he was perfect. And he's drawing upon the pride that is in him, the pride that would even bring him to say, I will oppose God, I will sit on his throne. Yeah. And and then human beings became like this. So here it's talking about someone who's a man, who's a king, but it's also talking about the devil, because they parallel. And obviously when he talks about Eden and the mountain of God, being cast out of the mountain of God, right there, and that's the way the Bible is. There he's talking about being cast out of heaven, where it's talking about one thing, and that's also talking about something else, or it's talking about something future, but it's also talking about something past or something present. And you really cannot assume that you know what it is saying, especially if you don't have the Holy Spirit, especially if you have the devil, talking over your shoulder, saying, this is what it means, obviously he's going to glorify himself. He's going to make himself God. He's going to get you to trust in him. That would be his goal, So this is a really amazing revelation for me about the devil, to understand better, and then to see that there's just so little written about him having any kind of talent, that from what I can see, he doesn't have any. So, and he's very jealous of people because they have this talent that comes from being made in the image of God. So going on, dispelling other myths related to the devil is people's idea about Nephilim. It talks about having women, the daughters of men, having relations with what is pretty clear are satanic angels, right? And then saying that there was offspring from that. So, well, I don't know if that exists. I don't know if it ever did, but I do know that when it talks about the seed of the devil, remember it said, I'll put enmity between her seed and his seed. Her seed is Christ and the children of Christ. His seed is the children of the devil. But everyone who is either the seed of the devil or the seed of Christ became that through choice, through faith. I just so firmly believe that Calvinism stems from an attempt to understand why people are so polarized. On one hand, so wanting evil, so wanting the devil that they don't accept Christ's salvation, and on the other hand, wanting Christ's salvation. And I think that it was an attempt to explain that. So then you end up having the seed of Christ on one hand and the seed of the devil, and they're at enmity with each other. Like it says, the real conflict in the world is the enmity between those two groups of people. And but I do not believe that anywhere in the Word, God, as we understand him, would just, be trying to tell people, hey, I chose for you. You have, like it says, the bondage of their will, in that Calvinistic theology, bondage of their will to choose the wrong choice and to be damned. No way. There's no way that God predestined people. John 3:16, he loved the world, sent his only son, that anyone who believes, anyone, and then it says that those who rejected Christ is because they love darkness more than light. So that's why. It's not because God wanted them to, and the thing is, we just can't understand. We don't understand. Those of us who our hearts are open, we want life, we want light, we want Christ, can't understand people who don't, who want darkness and want it badly enough, because we all have our sin nature, but want it badly enough to cut themselves off from God and basically just know that they're damning themselves, that they're predestining themselves. And then it talks about being predestined to become conformed to Christ's image. Okay, so that he predestined that anyone who would put faith in Christ would then be conformed to Christ's image. Also, foreknowing us. He foreknew us because he knows the end from the beginning. He knows the choice you're going to make. That's why. It's not that he prescribed and pre-wrote you to make a bad choice. Anyone. And it's a terrible theology to say that to anyone. To try to tell people that God just bound their will to making a bad choice. No way. I mean, that's not God as we know him. That is not God as we know him. Why does it say he desires all to be saved? He does. I mean, I desire all to be saved. My heart hurts about anybody that I am pretty sure isn't saved. That doesn't come from me. That comes from God. That comes from Christ. You know? If that comes from Christ, and Christ, why did he do what he did? Why did he go into hell to save mankind? Because his heart hurt more than anybody's. He was willing to do that because he hurt so badly for people to be condemned. And it talks about in that theology, and Paul even said it, I know he did, but I know he was trying to explain, and maybe if he was here to tell us more about what he was trying to say, we'd know more about what he was trying to say. But he was saying that they're vessels of wrath, these people who are going to hell, that they're vessels of wrath. But think about it, that God didn't need vessels of wrath. His wrath was satisfied when Christ went to the cross, so there's no way that he needed to have vessels of wrath, or that he would prescribe for people to become vessels of wrath. And this is a terrible theology, absolutely terrible, and I have abandoned it fully. And then I think it was also a way of saying, well, why did I choose, correctly? Because I must have more grace, or, it must be because I have more grace. But, everybody was given grace. And it still doesn't mean that you credit yourself for having made the right choice. It doesn't mean that. And it doesn't mean that you turn around and do that. I mean, we just know that sin is compounded in people over generations to the point that they love sin so much that they can't part from it. And then why any of us who also were born from exactly the same wombs, we come from the same mold, and that we chose otherwise. Nobody really has a good explanation for this as of yet. And maybe we can't know until we go and talk with God face to face. Maybe we're just not going to know, Maybe we'll find an answer before then, but maybe not. So another thing God showed me is it actually talks about a conversation between God and the devil regarding Job. And the devil asks God for permission to mess Job up. Because he says, hey, you think he's such a great guy and he loves you so much. Why don't you do this and that to him and then see if he really is? And in that book, we see God actually wanting to try to prove Job to Satan. He wants to prove what Job is really made of to Satan. He's not trying to prove to himself about Job. He's not testing Job because he already knows Job. He already knows his heart. He doesn't need to test Job to find out what Job is about. And of course, Job doesn't know what's going on. He's not even aware of the devil, so he doesn't really, and he only sees the supernatural, and so he just attributes it to God, and he's very confused. And then finally, when God restores everything to him, he's like, oh, I'm sorry I questioned you. Oh, I'm sorry. Wow. He's just so amazed, at God and how God just restores everything to him. But in that, we see that God was trying to prove Job. Okay, so then what I was thinking was that a lot of what goes on in this world is just like that, where God, because he says to Paul says, take the messengers away. I think that they were people who were bothering him, messengers of Satan. There's other places in the Bible where it talks about messengers of Satan being people, and he's wanting God to remove this oppression from him of these messengers. And then God said, just trust me. I work best through your weakness. Again, the messengers are satanic. God is trying to prove something to the devil. And God uses the whole thing about him saying the devil was perfect. The devil has a very bizarre perception of perfection. And he is a perfectionist, and he thinks he's perfect, and he thinks he knows what's perfect. God uses imperfection in this world as a way to kind of almost play a game against Satan. He uses our imperfection and works through our imperfection to conquer the devil. He says, my power is made perfect in your weakness. That's what he says to Paul. And God, everything that God does is through imperfection and weakness. He says, not by power, not by might, but by my spirit. And then you think, well, isn't your spirit like really powerful? But yes and no. I mean, in a way, his spirit is just mysterious in all the ways that his spirit can, conquer or change or conquer the devil or change anything. And he's saying not by power, because he doesn't work through because the devil's people, shallow, satanic people who've conformed to the devil's image, everything is just, the physical survival, the physical realm, money answers everything. It's just all, it's superficial, and they're not thinking about eternity. They're not thinking about the third dimension. They don't have love in their lives. So for, the way that they see things as perfect and as they believe in physical might, more than anything. And God says, not by power, not by might, but by my spirit. And that's, again, he has, his mysterious and amazing ways of showing the devil, who's the boss, who is the boss. There's a lot more that could be said on this topic, but I was going to add was one thing, because I know people will think of this one where it talks about saying that the angels were, or that angels like Michael were not opposing Satan, and saying, the Lord rebuke you, and not wanting to come against them themselves. And so people would say, well, isn't that trying to say that you're not supposed to oppose the devil? And I think that what that is talking about is that when on earth Michael was handing over authority to Christ and to people who have Christ against the devil, because it talks about Christ when he went into hell for 72 hours, he made sport of principalities and powers. So I think at that point Michael was recognizing that the authority was being handed to people who have Christ and to Christ, and because it says that he and other angels actually cast Satan out of heaven. So he obviously then was fighting against the devil and winning. So I just think it has to do with handing over the authority to Christ and to people who have Christ. And we know that in Luke 10 that the disciples came back and said, wow, Jesus, even the spirits are subject to us in your name. Obviously evil spirits. And then Jesus said, yeah, well, don't rejoice in that, just rejoice that you're saved, saying it's not about the power, and it's not about ego or anything, but obviously saying, and he says, I give you authority over all the power of the devil, over serpents and scorpions, and nothing shall by any means hurt you. Yeah. So God made perfection out of imperfection. And it's why God says in Ezekiel 28, speaking to the devil, he says, you were perfect. The devil has a skewed view of perfection. He thinks he understands God's law, but he doesn't. And that's why he's an accuser. So Revelation talks about the liars and the cowards going to the lake of fire. And through deception, the main thing they learn from Satan is how to be liars and angels of light. And it always leads up to betrayal, like Judas. And when I talk about lying, I believe that when they're talking about lying in Revelation, they're not talking just about telling a lie. They're talking about liars
are people who live a lie. It's a full-time job. Like there's a quote about the hypocrite, that he has a full-time job. And they are the ones who go to the lake of fire. And their deception is to betray. They are stone cold, hate-filled, and they have betrayal in mind. And then cowards, fear. Now, fear is, it's not talking about fear in general. Fear is a healthy warning of danger. And Job found his sons being feared. He feared his sons being judged, and this was not sin. His fear became reality, not because he was judged or because fear brought it on, but because his sons were judged and he could not choose for them. And this was his fear for them. Cowards are those who did not heed Jesus' warning, who said, "Do not fear those who can kill the body," which is the devil, and people who serve the devil. Instead, fear him who can destroy both body and soul in hell. And who is that? That is God. And the coward fears the devil and not God, so their fear is sin because of that. So talking about people before Christ and after Christ, they had people before. The full knowledge of the devil was made possible through Christ, and they imitated. But before Christ, they imitated the devil, but they did not necessarily have full knowledge of his existence. But after Christ, they did have full knowledge, and then entered into an alliance with him. So the sin after Christ is greater, the blasphemy that cannot be forgiven. It's the second fall, and it's greater because even Adam and Eve did not lose their relationship to God. Not necessarily even Cain was cut off. And the passage in Jeremiah talks about the depths of sin the human heart is capable of beyond understanding. Humans have an unprecedented capacity for evil. The devil is always trying to tell us, the people of faith, our future. His is in hell, yet he seems unconcerned about that, while adding to the wrath of God by trying to tell us we are on our way to hell, or that he's sure we will fall and commit unpardoned sin. He denies Romans 8:1, Romans 8:28, Deuteronomy 23, verse 5, and Jeremiah 29:11. He contests those scriptures and our promise to be conformed to Christ's image. He contests all of that. And I want you to tell me, what has the devil created, if he is creative at all? And are not creative humans his biggest object of hate? And why? Don't they remind him more of the God who created them? And isn't that why? I'm not saying that they're more like God, as far as being righteous, but just they're more of a reminder because of their gifts and talents. Sad thing is, I've heard people talk about how America right now has the same atmosphere as pre-war Germany. And the sad thing is what has happened in America is that a lot of people have been taken over by demonic forces. And this is what happened in Germany. And they had a dream in Germany of having control over the world, and they believed the Bible was telling them that they were going to have that they were fulfilling biblical prophecy, which is what I believe a lot of people who've yielded to the devil in America are believing now. And that possibly our ex-president is supposed to be their guy. Who they think is supposed to be their guy, and that they're going to just have this great victory of control. More control than Satan has had already. And then I want to talk about another myth that has to do with men, and that Adam being a man. And I got this from Hal Lindsey, by the way, really, pretty much. Most of it. So he was blamed for the fall. And why? Because he was the first person created, and he had established a closer relationship with God than Eve. He knew better what he was doing, therefore. He had more knowledge of the sin of the sin he was committing than she did. She was deceived, but she didn't have as much knowledge of what she was doing. She convinced him, but see, at that point, can't you see how he could have just turned around, helped her, and then it would have been all over. She would have been the only one who had done any wrong, and he could have helped redeem her. But he wasn't the new Adam; he was the old Adam. So there's this myth about men being more evil than women because of that, and that's absolutely not true. In fact, there are places in the Bible, like Solomon talked about, he said, one man among 1,000, one good man among 1,000 I can find. And not one woman can I find. And there's a lot in the Bible about how the potential for evil in women is so great, and that they're also have more potential for being deceived. And this is why male authority is so important in the Bible. And women who lose their moorings, push off from the shore of male authority, get lost at sea. And there's a lot of pagan roots to considering women more pure than men in our culture, because we were, up until not that long ago, very pagan. In the Druid and Celtic pagan world, women were were very dominant, and there was always this belief that women were better than men. Adam was blamed, and then it became this huge myth. So what happens to these people who make this alliance with the devil and they know they're going to hell, which is, it's so foolish that you find it hard to understand them making that choice. But there would have to be that they, one thing is they have injury, and haven't we all? And reason why they're angry at God, and so they find companionship with the devil, who comes along and says, well, you feel that way. Look at me. Look at God prescribed for me that I would be what I am and then go to hell. And it's like, that song by the Rolling Stones, Sympathy for the Devil. They have sympathy for the devil. But, the way I look at it is, it says in Psalms, Lord, what is man that you are even mindful of him? And yet you've made him little lower than the angels. So little lower than the angels, yet lower than the angels. And the way I feel is, whatever was happening in heaven, the angels, by God's decree, but they decided they were going to cast him out, and and that is call it angel politics. I mean, that's their business. I'm a human. I'm living on earth with the limitations of a physical body. I mean, there's so little about that larger world, especially the world of heaven, that I really know and understand. And I'm sure that we will someday. But it's their business, it's their business, whatever was going on. I don't have to figure that out for them. I am lower than the angels. And then, like, the animals, you think about the animals. Are the animals, like, trying to figure out human problems, No, because they're lower than us. And we're, I'm sure, a lot lower than the angels, and the animals are lower than us. So, I mean, that's a really good, a lot of times looking to the animals is a really good idea, So, as I understand it, evil was created to be shunned. Evil was created to, the devil was created as the epitome of evil. Everything about him, that whole thing about pride, he's just the epitome of evil. Everything. He's shallow. He's cynical. He doesn't believe in love, and he latches onto people who are like that, who, they just want to give up, and they want to be lazy, and they don't want to work for anything. They don't want to work for love, for anything, because love can take a lot of work, and making things happen, making things good can take a lot of work. So the 7 deadly sins. The 7 deadly sins are deadly for them. They're not deadly for us. None of the 7 deadly sins are deadly for us who have Christ, because Christ, gives us the victory over the power of sin. But sin is empowered for them, and the devil draws from it. But sin, I mean, the devil and everything that he is was created to be shunned, and I think that's all I need to know. I think that's all we need to know. But on the subject of knowing, I think knowing is one of the main reasons that people made an alliance with the devil. Same thing as in the garden. They're like, I don't think God is being fair to me because I don't understand this, I don't understand that, and he's not going to tell me. It says in the Bible, the secret things belong to the Lord, but the things that are revealed belong to us and to our children. If he hasn't revealed it, I guess we don't need to know. But they're not happy with that. They want to know things that God isn't showing them. And so what do? The devil comes along and says, I'll tell you. I'll explain it to you. And they believe that. They believe he's going to give them the right information, and he's the father of lies. And by the way, he's the lord of the flies. Beelzebub. Look at these flies flying around me. Oh gosh, he was put in charge of the flies. Whoa, whoa, big honor. But anyway, the knowing, it's the same exact sin that happened in the garden, only now they have full knowledge, more than Adam and Eve ever had. And now they're making an alliance with the devil where they're willing to let go of their souls like Esau. It's a far, far greater sin that we're dealing with when people are taken over by the devil like this. It's unprecedented. It's heartbreaking. This is from a bathroom about Germany and America. Okay, so, I just, like another thing that God just showed me was that Martin Luther had just an amazing, amazing revelation of grace. As a Catholic, not to discount Catholics. A lot of Catholics I know are sincere, but he had a huge revelation of grace. And this revelation that he had it just sparked, it went like wildfire, like around Europe. It was like during that time that the Wesleyan revival happened in England, and it affected everybody. It birthed Protestant faith. And I know he had some Calvinist ideas too, but the thing is that, then you see what happened in Germany later, and that it was because the devil was so mad about what had been released from Germany to the world through Martin Luther. And this is exactly true about America. When you think of the effect America has had in the world, the Queen at the dedication of the Second Liberty Bell in 1976, talking about how America had helped England go from being an empire to being just a commonwealth. And America had changed England phenomenally. I've spent enough time in Europe to know what Europe is like more in the present. And how much it had to have changed, from that domination by kings. You think about they were goofy kings, like the one in Germany that built that castle that Disney based their castle on, and they hoarded wealth. They had so much control, and the effect America had to change Europe. And then think about China now, and how much China has changed too, and like their desire to be more like America in their economic system, and wanting to have the benefits of the kind of system that America has. And then think about the fight to overcome communism that did culminate in the fall of the Berlin Wall, the effect that it had on Korea, and now now North Korea, the changes that are happening there. I mean, and I credit Dennis Rodman for a lot of possibly having a large part in that. And just America, just around the world, the freedom that's been released, and the Protestant faith then too, that has been released around the world. Revivals that have happened here. Like there was a revival in Toronto that spread through the British Commonwealth. But, just everything, even revival like that. Revival was released because you think about when revivals started in England, and they started after people had settled here. It was after America. You don't hear about revivals happening in England back in those dark days of the lordship of kings. Oh my goodness. And who is going to be more angry about that than the devil? And he wants revenge. Revenge on America for all the freedom that America has released to the world. And you don't have to go any farther than that to understand, why. And then he has a lot of people who sympathize with him, for reasons that are just almost impossible to understand. But they want to help him to do what he wants to do, to get the revenge that he wants to get.